Showtime with Mr. DJ, resuming countdown of my fancy playlist of March 18th, 1983, and covered quite a few British acts so far on this fancy playlist. Def Leppard, although they had an American sound like you wouldn't believe. When I first heard Def Leppard, I was thinking, man, these guys, they're from the Midwest. They just got that Midwest rock and roll sound to them. The cornfields of Iowa. But they're from England. Sheffield, England, I believe. I got I just marvel at the British and the Europeans. They could sound American. But, America's a huge market, and you got to do what you got to do to break into this market. So there you go. Well, anyway, Def Leppard had talked about Adamant, and there was Heaven 17, Total Quelo, and now at number 37, the Psychedelic Furs. Love My Way, produced by Todd Rundgren. At number 37, up from number 38. Doing better on my fantasy playlist than it did on the charts over here in the States. The stats on that record only went to number 44. Was not embraced by the top 40 stations in this country. At least a lot of them did not play it. And didn't do much better in England. That's what surprised me. Went to number 42 in England. And but in New Zealand, number 9. Number 9 in New Zealand. So they got some major success overseas, New Zealand. And now we got, we got it at number 37 on my fancy playlist 35 years ago. Psychedelic Furs from England, they were part of the punk rock scene back in the late 70s. Started out as a 5-man band and eventually reduced to a 4-man band. They went through a dark period in the early 80s before they hooked up with Todd Rundgren. First album was in 1980 and their second album was in 1981. Their first album didn't do too bad in England. Went to number 18 on the British album charts, and their second album yielded a couple of top 40 British singles, including the original version of Pretty in Pink. 1981 in Britain, which was re-released in England. It was from a movie called Pretty in Pink. It was directed by John Hughes and went to number 18 when it was re-released in England in 1986. But did not, if I remember correctly, did not make top 40 over here in the States when it was re-released. God, that was an awesome record. Got the guitar wall of sound in that record. But anyway, both of those albums was produced by Steve Lillywhite. The second album was called, I wrote down the name of the second album. It was Talking in 1981. By 1982, they were a 4-piece band, and they lost Steve Lillywhite as a producer. And some of the people who backed them up at CBS Records, they sort of fell through the woodwork, I guess. And, they came to America and they hooked up with Todd Rundgren. They also the band's management wanted David Bowie, asked David Bowie if they would produce the group's third album. And David Bowie was a fan of the Psychedelic Furs, but he had commitments. And their first producer, Steve Lillywhite, had commitments. But boy, it was a charm with Todd Rundgren. And found out some things that just blew me away. Well, first off, Todd Rundgren, he wanted to realize the group's potential, add a wall of sound of his own to the group's sound, and he brought in some session musicians, some extra session musicians, horn players. He brought in a saxophone player. And he brought in, a classical cello player. The group was cool with that, but you won't believe this. Todd Rundgren brought in 2 guys named Flo and Eddie. Flo and Eddie, their real names. It was Mark Follman and Howard Kalin, 2 guys from the Turtles. Yes, the Turtles, Happy Together. She Wants to Be With Me, or I can't remember that song. It was a fantastic song they did in 67, and Eleanor in 68. Well, from the 60s, they brought these 2 guys in, Flo and Eddie of the Turtles. And the group was not cool with that. And here's why. Because they were brought into the latter production of the album. And they were producing this album in Todd Rundgren's own private studios in New York. And Todd Rundgren brought in these two guys, Flo and Eddie, and the members of the Psychedelic Furs, they thought, well, I thought this album was done. I thought all the cuts were finalized. But Todd Rundgren, now let's bring in Flo and Eddie. And this was their first time as session singers. And Psychedelic Furs were like, these guys are establishment. Flo and Eddie from the 60s, man. We're a new wave 80s. Come on. Man, we punked out at one time. We're in the post-punk era. I mean, what are these guys going to be doing and singing back up on our album? Well, it worked out. Flo and Eddie, they knew they had a lot to prove on this album. As session singers for the first time, they had much to prove. And Todd Rundgren had them sing backup on 3 or 4 tracks off the album. And things were good. I mean, the group warmed up to Flo and Eddie. They said, you guys are pretty cool. You guys are doing a good job on the album. So here's the deal. Flo and Eddie, they leave the recording studio, right? They're done. They put their focus on 3 or 4 tracks. But then Todd Rundgren says, Flo and Eddie, wait a minute. Hold on. Don't leave yet. I want you to listen to the next single, to the single off this album. Love My Way. Give a listen to this single. Flo and Eddie, they listen to the single, to the demo, and they're like, man, and this was going to be the hit. And they said, this song is a hit. We've got to sing on this song because this song's going to be the hit off the album. So sure enough, Todd Rundgren, he put Flo and Eddie back to work, singing back up on Love My Way, dubbed their vocals in, and I can't believe it. Can you imagine the Turtles singing on a new wave record? I'm like, what? Man, you just learn some fabulous things. The world of learning. Yes, indeed. Psychedelic Furs, formed by Richard Butler and Tim Butler? Tim Butler, bass guitar player. This was in 1977. Love My Way. I've already gone through the chart stats of the record. Is there anything else I need to add? I'm sure there's something else I missed. No, I think I covered everything. My favorite song by the Psychedelic Furs. God, The Ghost in You. Wasn't that a brilliant record? God, I listened to it on YouTube last night, and I got goosebumps. I was like, God. I remember watching the video on Night Tracks on WTBS in the spring of 1984, probably quite vividly for the video because I remember I got hit by a car. And I was recuperating, sitting in a chair watching the video, all banged up. It's a lovely record, The Ghost in You by the Psychedelic Furs. And then Richard Butler, he did his thing with Love Spit Love back in the 90s. They had a couple of great songs out they used to play on a hit line. Well, anyway, I got to stop rambling because you're probably like, okay, Mr. DJ, you said your piece, just shut up. Okay. All right. Psychedelic Furs at number 37 on my fantasy playlist, March 18th, 1983.